What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo with the wide receiver and tight end starts and sits for week 13. As I do every week, I talk about the usage trends, some of the performance that we've seen recently, and break it down into starts, sits, flexes, etc. for the wide receiver and tight end position. So if you guys do enjoy this video at any point, please hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. I can see on the back end that about 75% of you guys that are watching these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you could go ahead and correct that, it doesn't cost you anything and we really appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's hit the intro and then we'll get right into this. Okay, so the matchup chart, wide receivers for the week. As always, you can see adjusted fantasy points allowed, rank and pass defense DVOA, and PFF coverage grade, all culminating into a weighted average passing grade matchup, basically. As you can see at the top, Hunter Renfrow, Devontae Smith, Ravens, Bucks, Rams wide receivers have some of the better matchups. And then at the bottom, we have Jacoby Myers and Kendrick Bourne, the Bills wide receivers, the Bengals wide receivers, and Darnell Mooney with some of the less op matchups this week. If you guys want to see this in bigger form, you can follow me over on Twitter at Football Stock, but I will leave it up above my shoulder here throughout the video that you can make reference to as I talk about each game and see what their matchups are as we go through. So we're going to start, as always, with Thursday Night Football, Cowboys at Saints. In this game, you're going to start Amari Cooper if he plays, start CeeDee Lamb, and flex Michael Gallup. Now, the most recent news we have is that Amari Cooper is expected to play. He did travel with the team. It sounds like he's cleared COVID protocols, and he is expected to play according to the team. If that happens, he's probably coming back to a healthy dose of Marshawn Lattimore. We've seen in weeks past when the Cowboys have played shadow corners, that shadow corner has been on Amari Cooper and not CeeDee Lamb. Back when they played the Eagles, it was Darius Slay. Back when they played the Patriots, it was JC Jackson, so on and so forth. So if Amari Cooper is back, I'm expecting Marshawn Lattimore to be glued to him. And then CeeDee Lamb, of course, will have the better matchup alongside Michael Gallup. And if Cooper doesn't play for whatever reason, then CeeDee Lamb will probably get the Marshawn Lattimore treatment. But regardless, even with Cooper back, Michael Gallup is still in play as a top 36 guy for me. All three of these wide receivers should be in your starting lineup despite the tough matchup for Amari Cooper. On the other side of things, I think you could desperation flex a guy like Traquan Smith, who's seen 5, 8, and 7 targets the last 3 games, and he sees Jordan Lewis in coverage this week, who just got wiped for like 6 catches, 130 yards against Hunter Renfrow on Thanksgiving. So Traquan Smith, I think you could do worse. I don't really want to start any Saints wide receivers, though, with Taysom Hill starting this game at quarterback. We expect the pass volume, which had seen an uptick in recent weeks with Trevor Siemian, to go down again with Taysom Hill starting the game. Of course, he is more of a rushing quarterback. I expect them to lean on Mark Ingram, no Alvin Kamara in this game, lean on Taysom Hill in the run game as well. Moving on to the tight end position in this game, we do have Dalton Schultz, who's seen 5+ targets in every game this season, except for week 2 and week 10. So pretty much every game, you're getting a consistent target share out of Dalton Schultz, and he's a guy that, of course, has been capable in the red zone as well. So he is in your starting lineup as a top 12 tight end. Now let's move on to the 1 p.m. games. We have the Colts at Texans. In this game, you start the 2 usual suspects, of course, Michael Pittman and Brandon Cooks. Michael Pittman has definitely had a few down weeks in recent games, but mainly because he hasn't scored a touchdown in 3 games so far. The only concern for this game, Michael Pittman not performing again, is that this could get out of hand because Jonathan Taylor runs away with this one, steals the show, and absorbs all the touchdown volume similar to what we saw in week 11 against the Buffalo Bills. But I expect in a game script where I expect them to move the ball because of Jonathan Taylor, that's usually good for everybody involved. So Michael Pittman Jr., I have no concerns with starting him as a top 24 wide receiver. He should absolutely be in your lineup. And same goes with Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks has been a little inconsistent recently in terms of volume. We've seen him get 10+ targets, or we've seen him get 4 or 5 targets. It's kind of just no in between right now with this guy. But like I said, I'll trust both of these guys as the focal points of their respective passing games. On the screen right now, you guys can see their matchups. Michael Pittman Jr. expected to see Terrace Mitchell for the most part on the outside, Desmond King on the other side. He kind of just splits time on either side of the field. And then Brandon Cooks, same thing with Xavier Rhodes and Rocky Sin. For the most part, both of these pass defenses have been pretty decent as of late, so I'm not expecting a huge passing performance from either quarterback. I expect the running backs to be the ones to do the damage in this game. At the tight end position, Jack Doyle has low-key been pretty solid since week 8. I believe he's like a top 5 tight end in fantasy. So I would say he's worth a streaming option if, let's say, you lost Darren Waller and you weren't able to pick up Foster Moreau. If you want to go pick up Jack Doyle, throw him into your lineup as a top 20 tight end, I would say, on the week. But overall, probably not looking to start any tight ends from this game. Vikings at Lions, the next game that we're going to talk about. We have Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Of course, they are staples of your fantasy lineup. I found this tweet interesting, so I kind of wanted to bring this up. But nonetheless, this should still be a solid matchup all around for Thielen and Jefferson. But it is worth noting, and Dwayne McFarland tweeted this out, that the Lions are a very heavy zone coverage team, and Minnesota apparently distributes the ball very evenly versus zone versus against man, where Justin Jefferson is consistently the number one go-to guy. For example, when they played Baltimore a couple of weeks ago, Adam Thielen, Tyler Conklin, and Dalvin Cook are a little bit more heavily involved in games where they're playing against zone coverage. So Adam Thielen might be a bit of a better start, knowing that Justin Jefferson probably won't dominate targets in this game. Although, as you guys can see on the screen, he has a 100.0 matchup advantage against Amani Oruwariye and Will Harris, depending on his alignment. So either way, you're starting these Vikings wide receivers. On the Lions side of things, you're probably not starting this guy in season long, but in DFS, I really do like Josh Reynolds for cheap with no DeAndre Swift in this game. We've seen Jared Goff use Josh Reynolds going back to their Rams days. And we saw it on Thanksgiving. Of course, Josh Reynolds had a long touchdown, a 40-yard touchdown in that game. So Josh Reynolds, I think if you're desperate, is not the worst play in the world. And if you're looking for some salary in DFS, I do think he is a pretty solid play in this one. With DeAndre Swift currently leads the Lions in targets right now. So he is their number one receiver right now. So the fact that he is going to be out for this game points to the fact that the wide receivers and TJ Hawkinson, of course, who we'll talk about next, are going to be more involved in this game plan. Like I said, with TJ Hawkinson, people are probably a little bit annoyed with him because he's been inconsistent, especially in terms of his target share. But you got to remember the position that he plays. The tight end position is not supposed to be Travis Kelce's and Darren Waller's, where you're the focal point of your offense and you are getting all the targets for your offense. He is the tight end 8 right now, TJ Hawkinson, in points per game, and he's the tight end like 5 or 6 on the season right now. And he's still an every week starter, in my opinion, even though he's a big headache with the offense not being very good and TJ Hawkinson not receiving consistent target volume. He's still one of the better tight ends in fantasy right now. And like I said, I think he is the biggest benefactor outside of Jamal Williams, obviously, of DeAndre Swift being out of the lineup, because I think he's probably going to lead this team in targets this week and going forward without DeAndre Swift. So Giants at Dolphins, the next game that we're going to talk about here. We have Kenny Golladay, who is frustrating the hell out of a lot of people that drafted him. And we have Jalen Waddle. Of course, he is in your starting lineup. With Kenny Golladay, I still am willing to play this guy as a top 40 wide receiver. And kind of let me explain why, because I expect both Kadarius Toney and Sterling Shepard to miss this game again because they weren't practicing Wednesday. It doesn't sound like either of them were close to playing last week. Golladay was shadowed by Darius Slay last week, so that was a very tough matchup for him, and he still commanded 7 targets and was able to get like 50 receiving yards. This game, he does get Byron Jones as a shadow coverage matchup as well, but in terms of Byron Jones versus Darius Slay, Byron Jones is about 30 grade points lower in PFF's grading system and coverage than Darius Slay. Darius Slay is currently a top 5 corner right now in PFF's coverage grade, whereas Byron Jones is down at 56.1 as his coverage grade. So I know it's gross. Kenny Golladay has not been very good this season, but I would still roll him out this week as a top 40 wide receiver or as a flex option type. And in DFS, I think he's also a pretty good contrarian play as well. On to Jalen Waddle. Of course, he has been fantastic. Had a monster game last week. Could have even had a bigger game. There was a play where he was beating the guy deep and Tua didn't see him and checked the ball down instead. And Jalen Waddle could have legitimately had a 200-yard game last week, which is absolutely insane, especially considering the matchup that he played against. The Carolina Panthers are a top 5 pass defense, and he absolutely decimated them. So even though this matchup isn't easy for him either against the Giants, who are a lot more of a run funnel defense, could be a lot of Myles Gaskin and Phillip Lindsay in this game. But either way, Jalen Waddle is in my lineup. As you guys can see, he is expected to see Robinson on the outside. I don't know if Darnay Holmes is hurt or if they just benched him because he was terrible, but that should be a good matchup for Jalen Waddle. Like I said, this defense is pretty stingy against wide receivers, but I expect the Dolphins to be able to move the ball on offense. We've seen Tua's good games coincide with Myles Gaskin's good games as well. So if they can run the ball, that helps the offense overall. Like I said, Kenny Golladay expected to see shadow coverage from Byron Jones. Darius Slayton expected to see shadow coverage from Xavier Howard. But if Sterling Shepard or Kadarius Toney play in this game, it'll shake things up a little bit. Hopefully, if Kadarius Toney plays, he kind of just swaps out John Ross and nothing really changes. But we'll have to keep an eye on that. At the tight end position, we have Mike Gesicki in this game, of course. Down week last week, but he's still a top 12 tight end, in my opinion, with a high target ceiling each and every week. I currently have him as my tight end 9 on the week. I know he's been, he's had a game where he had 0 points, even though he had 7 targets. Last week, he only had like 15 yards on like 5 targets or whatever it was. So Gesicki's been a little inconsistent as of late in terms of his target share, but I'm still willing to roll him out there. Like I said, he's still a top 10 tight end. The position is just gross. So that's basically what you have to worry about with the tight end position in general. So Mike Gesicki is definitely in my lineup. Buccaneers at Falcons. In this game, you're going to be starting Mike Evans and starting Chris Godwin. The Buccaneers definitely have a reputation as being a pass funnel defense because they're so hard to run against. But at the same time, their pass defense and their defense as a whole, as a result, is getting much better because they're getting some of their starters back, like Jamel Dean, like Sean Murphy-Bunting. Carlton Davis should be coming back in a couple weeks as well. And Vita Vea, of course, was back last week. So I'm not really messing around with anybody in the Falcons wide receiving core outside of Cordero Patterson, of course, who's basically their running back too, and Kyle Pitts, who's their tight end. So I'm not messing with Russell Gage or Olamide Zaccheaus or anybody like that. Brady, on the other hand, has thrown 11 touchdowns against the Atlanta Falcons since he's been a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, and he threw 5 touchdowns against them in week 2. So this is a matchup that he has been very good in, and same goes for Mike Evans. Mike Evans wiped the floor with Fabian Moreau in week 2, so maybe they look to deploy A.J. Terrell in shadow coverage against Mike Evans. They haven't really used A.J. Terrell in shadow coverage much this season, but that last year when they played against the Tampa Bay Bucks, they did use him in shadow coverage in week 17, the game that Antonio Brown went off in, basically. So that is something to monitor with Mike Evans. He's going to be very, very chalky in DFS, if those of you guys who are playing DFS this week. So I might be avoiding Mike Evans at his current price point and his current ownership projection. But Chris Godwin, of course, has a great matchup regardless, facing Richie Grant in the slot. So he is a guy that I'm absolutely starting no matter what. At the tight end position, you have Kyle Pitts, of course. Kyle Pitts has kind of the same argument as TJ Hawkinson. Yes, he hasn't been good in recent weeks. He hasn't been getting the targets consistently and hasn't been very efficient. He's only scored 1 touchdown this entire season, and it came back in London when they put a defensive tackle on him in coverage, which was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. But you probably don't have a better option than Kyle Pitts at the same time. He's my tight end 7 on the week right now, and I would love to punish Kyle Pitts and put him down at tight end 15. But the truth of the situation is that he just simply is better than most of the other options at the tight end position. So I'm still going to roll with Kyle Pitts in this matchup. Like I said, this defense is a little bit more susceptible to the pass than they are to the run. So we'll have to see how Kyle Pitts is able to perform in this matchup. Last week, he has a good matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Didn't actually perform in this one. So kind of rinse and repeat the same arguments that we had for him last week. If he can't do it this week, it's not going to be looking too good for him for his rest of season outlook. So Eagles at Jets. In this game, you're going to start Devontae Smith and start Elijah Moore. Devontae Smith has faced a murderer's row of bad matchups the past 4 games against the Chargers, who rank top 3 against fantasy wide receivers, the Broncos, who've been very good against the pass, Marshawn Lattimore in shadow coverage 2 weeks ago, and then James Bradbury last week. And he's actually performed pretty well in those matchups. So I have a lot of confidence in Devontae Smith this week in an absolute smash spot. Of course, he has one of the easiest matchups in the league for wide receivers this week. It is pretty much all green above me right now. As you guys can see for the Jets, the only wide receiver that has a better matchup than him this week is Hunter Renfrow in terms of his weighted average. So Devontae Smith absolutely in my lineup, will be in my DFS player pool as well this week. Elijah Moore, on the other hand, also should see a solid matchup in this game. Corey Davis is expected to be aligned versus Darius Slay, not necessarily shadow coverage, but based on where they align typically, Corey Davis should see the majority of Darius Slay, with Elijah Moore working around Steven Nelson and in the slot against Avonte Maddox in some cases. So Elijah Moore, absolutely worth a start in this game. I know people are scared of Zach Wilson not getting him the ball consistently or whatever, but I'm expecting Elijah Moore to still command the same volume that we've seen him command in recent weeks. And Zach Wilson, hopefully now with a game under his belt, is a little bit more comfortable back in the starting lineup. As you guys can see on the screen, like I mentioned, Devontae Smith will see a lot of Bryce Hall and Javelin Goodry, depending on what side of the field he's lined up on. Elijah Moore mostly against Steven Nelson in the right side of the field, and then left cornerback would be Darius Slay, which is where Corey Davis would be lined up. So at the tight end position in this game, you're going to be starting Dallas Goedert. I sound like a broken record at this point, but seriously, Dallas Goedert's still a top 12 tight end for me right now. And unless you have Dawson Knox or Dalton Schultz or Mike Gesicki or any of the top end guys that I've already kind of talked about, I'm still going to start Dallas Goedert. Even though he had a terrible week last week, he's still getting the usage. This is a much easier matchup from Jalen Hurts' perspective as a passer. So I like Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith to bounce back big in this one. The Cardinals at Bears, the next game that we're going to talk about here, we have DeAndre Hopkins finally making his return by the looks of it. Kyler Murray, of course, finally making his return by the looks of it as well. Of course, you can also start Darnell Mooney with how he's been playing recently and flex Christian Kirk as well. DeAndre Hopkins would be aligned where Antoine Wesley is currently on this chart, where I have it highlighted right now. And he should be back to full health in this game alongside Murray. But the question for DeAndre Hopkins really is, do they ramp him up? Are they going to only play him 50, 60% of the snaps and let him, get acclimated back into playing shape? Or are they going to, because he had a bye week, are they just going to throw him back to the Wolves and play him out on his normal snap count as usual. I tend to think that they're just going to play him at his normal snap count, but you never know. Coming off of a multi-week injury, we usually see players get ramped up to some degree, and that could be the case with DeAndre Hopkins. So if you're playing DFS this week, I probably wouldn't play DeAndre Hopkins unless you're in a large field tournament and you're looking for an edge there. Christian Kirk, on the other hand, has an absolute cake matchup against Xavier Crawford in the slot. He is currently giving up an 84% catch percentage this season. So I actually really, really like Christian Kirk as a pivot away from DeAndre Hopkins and DFS, and just as a season-long play in general, because Kyler Murray is back in this game. And we saw when Kyler Murray was on the field, Christian Kirk was like a borderline top 24 wide receiver in points per game. He was very, very productive. And even with Colt McCoy, had some flashes of production as well. So I really like Christian Kirk this week as a guy that you can throw into your lineup. On the other side of things, Darnell Mooney, of course, coming off of back-to-back 100-yard games, one on Thanksgiving and then one 2 weeks ago with Andy Dalton. If he plays Allen Robinson, I have a little bit more apprehension playing a guy like Darnell Mooney, because targets have really been the reason why he's been performing really well. And if Allen Robinson is back on the field, they might go back to splitting those targets kind of 50-50. And this is a rough matchup against the Cardinals pass defense that has been very good. So if Allen Robinson plays, I'm probably downgrading Darnell Mooney to more so a low-end flex play. Whereas if Allen Robinson is out, I think this is a top 30 wide receiver through and through, and you have no concerns throwing him into your lineup. At the tight end position, I think both of these guys are streamable, but neither of them are must starts for any reason. But Cole Kmet is coming off of a career high 11 targets this past week, and then Zach Ertz had a big game before the bye week. I'm not starting any of these guys if I have better options, but both of these guys are in my top 15 for the week. All right, to the final 1 p.m. game of the slate, we have the Chargers at the Bengals. In this game, you're going to start Jamar Chase and Keenan Allen for sure. And then, of course, you can also start pretty confidently Mike Williams and T. Higgins as well. This game currently has a 50.5 over-under. Both defenses are pretty solid against the pass, especially the Chargers. They're very good against the pass. But I like the pace and scoring of this game to probably carry all these guys to good fantasy production. 5 straight games of double-digit targets for Keenan Allen. He's an absolute monster from a target perspective. So I have no concern starting him. He's a top 5 receiver each and every week for me in my lineup, just based on his volume alone. Meanwhile, Mike Williams only has 1 touchdown since his week 5 explosion against the Cleveland Browns. So he could be due for some touchdown regression based on his usage and his targets and his downfield production. He just hasn't been able to find the end zone after scoring. I think he scored like 5 or 6 touchdowns in the first 5 weeks of the season. Has only scored 1 since then. So he might be in for some regression, as I mentioned. Jamar Chase, to a similar vein, has also fallen off recently in terms of his production, noticeably as well. After his scorching start to his rookie year, he has been kind of reduced to like a boomer bust guy at this point. And T. Higgins is the one actually that had the big game last week. So nonetheless, I'm still starting these guys, but it is not a great matchup for the Bengals wide receivers. And it's going to cause me to sit Tyler Boyd. I'm not even going to mess with him in my lineup. Either way, though, there's no such thing as this wide receiver nirvana that we chase where nobody's going to have a down game. Jamar Chase is going to have down games. Hell, Cooper Kupp is going to have down games. So regardless, I'm still starting these guys as top 20 wide receivers because that is what they are, in my opinion. As you guys can see on the screen, we do have Jamar Chase in coverage against Michael Davis, who I would say is probably the best corner on the Chargers right now, assuming Asante Samuel is out for this game. T. Higgins expected to see Campbell on the outside. Looks like he has the better matchup on that side of the ball. And then Keenan Allen against Mike Hilton, in the slot. And then Mike Williams against Chidobe Awuzie and Eli Apple on the outside. That is kind of how those matchups shake out. I expect this game to actually be relatively high scoring. Joe Mixon should be able to do damage on the ground. Same goes for Austin Eckler to the Bengals run defense as well. And that should keep the offenses moving and keep them productive. So at the tight end position in this game, I would sit all of these tight ends, Jared Cook, CJ Uzomah, unless you're desperate. I suppose in a high scoring game, it's not the worst thing in the world to throw a dart at one of these tight ends, especially in DFS leagues, but I'm probably not messing with any of these guys in season long. So moving on to the 4 p.m. games, we actually have 4 p.m. games and 7 1 p.m. games, which I think is a really good balance this week from the schedule makers. So I kind of hope we have that going forward. I don't really like when there's like 2 or 3 games on at 4 p.m. I like when we have like 4 or 5 on at 4 and then like 6 or 7 on at 1. I think that's a really good balance. Anyways, Jaguars at Rams, start Cooper Kupp, flex Odell Beckham Jr., flex Marvin Jones, and low-end flex a guy like Van Jefferson. Now, Cooper Kupp is Cooper Kupp. He's in your lineup each and every week, but Odell Beckham Jr. is the real story with the Rams passing game. He ran a route on 98% of Matthew Stafford's dropbacks, and he commanded a 24% target share as well. So in my opinion, he's kind of fully slid his way into the Robert Woods role. Basically everything we could have expected for Robert Woods if he was on the field and Odell Beckham wasn't there is exactly what I'm expecting out of Odell Beckham Jr. going forward. So he is a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 type each and every week. And in this matchup, in a very good matchup against a very bad pass defense, I really do like Odell Beckham Jr. this week. The Jaguars' targets, on the other hand, have become a lot more condensed. Now with no Jamal Agnew in the lineup and no Dan Arnold, they're both out for the season. Marvin Jones had 28 targets over the first 3 games when Dan Arnold was traded for in week 4. So with Marvin Jones, he was the bona fide number 1 until Dan Arnold got there. And that was even when DJ Chark was healthy. So I think what we're going to see out of Marvin Jones is kind of a resurgence in terms of his target share, in terms of how productive he's going to be down the stretch. And we're also kind of seeing a resurgence with Laviska Shenault moving back to his slot role, where he ran 71% of his routes out of the slot last week, and he's commanded 22 targets over the last 3 games. So worth a stash, I suppose. I would say this Jaguars offense should have been running between Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault this whole time. So maybe it took Dan Arnold and Jamal Agnew getting injured for that to happen and for Urban Meyer to realize that. But I think they might play a little bit better down the stretch, passing the ball to their best weapons, in my opinion, with Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault. As you guys can see on the screen, Cooper Kupp is going to wipe the floor with Rudy Ford. Laviska Shenault has Deontay Dion in the slot, which is a pretty bad matchup for him. Van Jefferson against Nevin Lawson on the outside. I think he is a good, solid flex play as well. Then Odell Beckham Jr. expected to split time between Tyson Campbell and Nevin Lawson as well. Marvin Jones expected to see Darius Williams on the left side. At the tight end position, I'm completely done with Tyler Higbee. The usage is so good for him, but he's just simply not getting there. He's not commanding the targets, not getting any red zone work. I'm probably just going to sit/drop him going forward. And because I'm saying this, now I'm finally giving up on Tyler Higbee. He's probably going to catch 2 touchdowns this week. That's just how fantasy works. But at the tight end position on the Jag side, I'm not messing with James O'Shaughnessy, even though Dan Arnold is out, and he probably will absorb that role. He wasn't valuable the first 3 games in the season. I don't expect him to be valuable now. So moving on to the Washington football team at Las Vegas Raiders. In this game, it's pretty straightforward. You start Terry McLaurin and you start Hunter Renfrow. You don't mess with anybody else. The Washington offense is finally getting healthy, and that is a good thing for Terry McLaurin. A lot of times people see people coming back from injuries and they think it's a bad thing for their targets. But in Terry's case, I would say it's definitely a good thing, because Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson, and Curtis Samuel now being healthy helps them move the chains. It helps them score points, helps them be more consistent as an offense at generating first downs. And that has been the problem for Terry McLaurin. So I'm okay with these guys all coming back if it means 1 or 2 less targets per game out of Terry, because I would rather get 8 efficient Terry McLaurin targets per game than 10 inefficient Terry McLaurin targets per game. So he is in my lineup for sure this week, even though he gets Casey Hayward likely in a shadow coverage matchup. Hunter Renfrow on the other side of things has an awesome matchup in this one, and he is also in probably the best spot he's been in all season. Now with no Darren Waller in this game, of course, no Henry Ruggs for the last couple of weeks, he has commanded 8+ targets in 4 of his last 5 games. And of course, we saw him blow up on Thanksgiving for over 100 yards. This game, like I said, will be without Darren Waller. So all the volume is probably going to go to Hunter Renfrow in the passing game. Maybe Brian Edwards, maybe Deshaun Jackson, maybe Zay Jones contribute, but Hunter Renfrow probably a 30% type of target share in this game. As you guys can see on the screen, Landon Collins is his primary matchup. I expect him to probably win that one with ease. And then, like I said, also Terry McLaurin expected to see Casey Hayward in shadow coverage. Also says DeAndre Carter has a pretty easy matchup advantage, but I'm probably not going to be getting too cute and messing around with that. At the tight end position, we have Foster Moreau and Logan Thomas. They're actually back-to-back in my rankings right now at 13 and 14. If you guys want access to my rankings, you can go to the link in the description and it'll say week 13 rankings available here. They are totally free to get. They were initially something that we were charging for at the beginning of the season, but our website license ran out. So now we're just going to give them away for free into the fantasy playoffs as a thank you for all the support that you guys have shown us this year. So if you want the rankings, like I said, link in the description. Foster Moreau played 100% of the Raider snaps in week 7 when Darren Waller was out the first time and commanded 6 targets and scored. So he is a guy that I'm absolutely willing to start in my lineup. They pretty much just copy and pasted the Darren Waller role and gave it to Foster Moreau when he was out. So I'm just going to trust that usage and trust that he can get there in a game that is a good passing matchup for the Raiders in general as well. And then Logan Thomas, on the other hand, he played like 80% of his full role on Monday night after we heard that he was going to be on a pitch count. I expect him to be back up to his full role, and he's a guy that borders on that 100% of the team snaps and routes for the team as well. So Logan Thomas is a guy that I'm absolutely willing to start each and every week going forward. Now to the Ravens at Steelers, the next game that we're going to talk about here, we have Marquise Brown, Deontay Johnson. Of course, those guys are in your lineup. And then we have Chase Claypool and Rashad Bateman, who are basically just flex plays at this point. I would say both of these wide receiving cores are pretty similar. We have one target leader, number one. Both Hollywood Brown and Deontay Johnson have had double-digit targets in 3 straight games. And for Hollywood Brown, he's had it in 4 straight games. And Deontay Johnson's had 13+ targets in 3 straight games. So these are the elite volume number 1 wide receivers of this team. And then Chase Claypool and Rashad Bateman both kind of fit the description as the number 2 wide receivers. They're going to get 6 to 8 targets per game with a good chance at a big play each and every week. Now, obviously, with Chase Claypool, we wish he had a better quarterback. He'd have an even better chance at a big play, but he is still getting the downfield usage, the usage that you want to see a wide receiver like him get. So we kind of just have to hope and pray that he's going to get better in this game. And then Rashad Bateman, of course, with Lamar Jackson now fully healthy, Marquise Brown on the field fully healthy, and Mark Andrews fully healthy. This offense is one of the best in the league, and I expect them to probably close out the season very strongly. So Rashad Bateman, a great guy. If he's available on your waiver wire, still go pick him up and stash him on your team, and you could still use him in a game like this against a pass funnel defense like the Pittsburgh Steelers, although they've been bad against everything as of late. So as you guys can see on the matchup charts right now, Marquise Brown against James Pierre, Deontay Johnson against Marlon Humphrey in on the outside as well as in the slot when he moves there. And then Rashad Bateman against Cam Sutton, Chase Claypool against Anthony Averett on the outside. At the tight end position, of course, you start both of these guys, Mark Andrews and Pat Freiermuth, both getting consistent targets, both getting consistent red zone work, and both are trusted by their quarterbacks. The final 4 p.m. game of the slate, 49ers at Seahawks. Start DK Metcalf, flex Brandon Ayuk, and flex Tyler Lockett. No Deebo Samuel in this game, which means Brandon Ayuk will definitely see an uptick in his usage for sure. Kind of knocks him into that top 24, top 25 wide receiver range. So he is a guy I'm absolutely willing to start in this game. The Seahawks stock, on the other hand, is at an all-time low. And it's one of the reasons I really love DK Metcalf, not only as a trade target if you haven't had your trade deadline yet, but also in DFS this week because he's the same price as Mike Evans, and everybody's going to play Mike Evans instead of DK Metcalf. This Seahawks offense is at an all-time low. Like realistically, nobody has a worse opinion of the Seahawks offense in the last 10 years as they have right now. I'm still starting DK Metcalf as a top 18 wide receiver because I trust the usage, I trust the ability, and I don't think Russell Wilson's a bad quarterback all of a sudden. I think he's eventually going to get back on track in this one, and it makes sense that it would be this game because the 49ers are not very good against the pass. They're good against the run, but they're not very good against the pass. All we need to hope for is more offensive plays out of this Seahawks team. I saw a stat on Twitter that Antonio Gibson and JD McKissic on Monday night had more touches than the Seahawks had offensive plays, which is insane. So we just need to hope that the Seahawks offense can generate first downs and hold on to the ball a little bit longer and not necessarily be off the field entirely. And you can't run against this team. They're going to have to throw the ball. I really do like DK Metcalf in a bounce back spot this week. And then Tyler Lockett, of course, is an every week flex play just because he's kind of that boomer bust option that we could have seen each and every week. And he could have had a monster game against Washington. He was really close to 2 long touchdowns, just didn't quite get there. And as you guys can see on the screen, another reason why I like DK Metcalf this week is that he gets Josh Norman in coverage, which is a very, very easy matchup for him, especially from a speed perspective. Josh Norman is an older corner, can't keep up with a guy like DK Metcalf, and is probably going to get bullied by him as well. Tyler Lockett against Emmanuel Mosley on the other side of the field, and then Brandon Ayuk against DJ Reed on the right side of the field for the Seattle Seahawks. He did a good job against Terry McLaurin last week, but I think Brandon Ayuk can get it done on him. Tight end position, of course, you are starting George Kittle. I expect him to be the biggest beneficiary of the Deebo Samuel injury. I'm expecting probably 8 to 10 targets out of George Kittle, potentially some red zone usage as well. So he is a guy that I really like starting this week in DFS as well. Sunday Night Football, Broncos at Chiefs. Start Tyreek Hill, flex Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. Tyreek is Tyreek. You guys don't need me to tell you anything about Tyreek. He is obviously in your lineup. The real story is the Broncos wide receivers because both Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton have had very low floors this season. And part of it is because this team really likes to run the ball. They have 2 good running backs with Javonte and Melvin Gordon, and they don't really like letting Teddy Bridgewater throw the ball over the yard. So both of these guys need to have a high pass volume in order to be very relevant for fantasy. They both have high target and big play upside, but we can't treat these guys as wide receiver 2s anymore. Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, they're boomer bust wide receiver 3s, just like Tyler Lockett, just like Mike Williams, just like Chase Claypool, where you're not going to get high floors out of these guys. The bad games for these guys are 2 targets for 12 yards. The good games out of these guys are long touchdowns, but the bad games really, really kill you. And that's why they can't be ranked over some of the guys with higher floors in them that also have pretty similar ceilings. Jerry Jeudy is expected to see L'Jarius Sneed in coverage, Cortland Sutton against Rashad Fenton, and then Tyreek Hill going up against Kyle Fuller. He has a very, very good matchup advantage there. Kyle Fuller has been very, very bad this season. He's the only weak link really in that Broncos secondary this season. So I expect Tyreek Hill to be able to do some damage against him. At the tight end position, we have Travis Kelce. Of course, he is in your lineup each and every week. And then sit Noah Fant. Noah Fant is basically in the same territory as Tyler Higbee for me. Getting the usage, getting some of the targets, just not performing to the level that you'd like to see. And it kind of goes along with the Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton thing, is that there's simply too many mouths to feed in this offense in a low volume, low pace offense with a bad quarterback. It's very, very hard for these guys to be consistent week over week. Usually there's only enough pass volume to go around for one of these guys to be productive each and every week. It's been Jerry Jeudy so far in the past couple games, but maybe it'll be Cortland Sutton. Maybe it'll be Noah Fant. Either way, I'm not excited about starting any of these Broncos pass catchers nonetheless. Now, moving on to Monday Night Football, the last game of the week, Patriots at Bills. In this game, you're going to start Stephon Diggs and then basically flex anybody else that's in this game. Both of these pass defenses are among the 3 best units in the league. They are very, very good pass defenses. Now, it is worth noting that Tre'Davious White just tore his ACL, so the Buffalo Bills defense might be a little bit worse, of course, losing their best corner. But nonetheless, Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers should only be treated as boomer busts, like top 45 wide receivers. They're probably not going to be very productive in this game. This defense is very, very good against wide receivers, and I trust them, even without Tre'Davious White, to probably hold up to that. Stephon Diggs is going to get the J.C. Jackson treatment. He will be shadowed by him. And J.C. Jackson, I saw a stat on Twitter that he has allowed the same amount of catches, 4, as he has interceptions in the last 4 games, which is 4 as well. So very, very good corner play coming from the Patriots right now. Stephon Diggs might be in for a bit of a rough one in this one. If you have better options, I'm probably not going to mess around with Emmanuel Sanders or Cole Beasley as well, because this defense is just very good against the pass. Tight end position in this game, the final thing we're going to get into, and then we'll head out of here. Start Dawson Knox, of course, big plays and touchdowns. The Patriots are one of the hardest matchups in the league against tight ends in the passing game in general, but I do trust Dawson Knox to be able to have a good chance at a touchdown or a big play in this one. Hunter Henry, kind of same thing, also a touchdown or bust type of tight ends, but you should have a better option than a guy like Hunter Henry. He's kind of like tight end 18 to 20 range for me on the week. Since Jonnu Smith has come back, we've seen his usage dial back just a little bit. So that is the end of the week 13 wide receiver and tight end starts and sits. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. Comment any of your thoughts down below. Like I said, subscribe to the channel if you are new. About 75% of you guys watching these videos are not subscribed. I would hope we can correct that if we gave you some valuable information today. Check out some of the other videos, the mustache players, for example, that I dropped on Tuesday, which has received a lot of support, so appreciate that. Weekly rankings available in the description. Peace out, guys. I'll talk to you soon.